Okay, we are beginning the second one on Torrance, Pennsylvania, as we stumble our way once again through a maze of digital nonsense. And the second one on Torrance has to do with a state hospital that was established there in the late 19-teens. Around 1915, there was a legislation enacted in the state legislature of Pennsylvania to have a mental hospital out in the southwest Pennsylvania area. And it was established that it should be at the area that was then known as Blairsville intersection, which became known as Torrance because this fellow, whose name was Torrance, Francis J. Torrance, he was in charge of the building committee for the hospital that should be built out there. Now, Francis Torrance did not want his name connected with it. He was a successful Pittsburgh businessman, even though he didn't want his name associated with it once he had passed away. The name of the place out there was changed to Torrance, even the post office. So that's what we're looking at this time. The last time we had a look at the little community that was there previous to the hospital, but this time we will see something about the hospital. Now, this is what it looked like when things were kind of in full operation there, when there were a lot more people there then than there are now. Also interesting is the fact that there was a railroad. See this? This is a railroad going around the whole place, which is not there anymore. And at the present time, many of these buildings are gone. There was a time when there were like about 3,000 patients in the mental institution there, and it's been reduced to about 1/10 of that. Next thing we'll see will be this building right here. I just want to give you a picture of some of these places. That was the Jamison building, named after John Jamison, who was the president of the board of directors in the 1920s. 1920s is when the thing really got its beginning. This is what we were looking at, this building. Now we are going to look at this building over here, which was named for another person on the board of directors named Grant Diebert. And that's what this looked like. Not too impressive, to be sure. Now, in the beginning years of the institution, there was an idea that they wanted to have a farm out there, that the inmates or the patients there could work on the farm. They thought it would give them kind of like a good feeling about their lives because they were doing something useful. Also, the fact that the farm would give them something to eat, you know. It would give them food that they needed to be, self-sustaining almost. Over the years, this did not turn out as well as expected, so it was eventually kind of phased out. These are chicken coops, which were also there at the beginning, raising chickens, which would be good for eggs and for chicken. This was a good picture of probably a lot of the patients who had to work at the farm. This was part of the farm. When they first started out there, they had about 3,000 acres. Now this was the institution over here, and you see what it's surrounded by, a lot of farmland. This over here was the little town that was there before the institution was built. That little town was there since even before the time of the railroad, when the railroad came through. But it was the railroad, the Pennsylvania Railroad, that really gave the place some existence. Now here is something that is frankly somewhat difficult for me to talk about, because this is the way they used to, what shall I say, they thought it was doing therapy on people. It was electroshock therapy. electroshock therapy had its origin by the fact that someone who was mentally ill was one time given an overdose of his diabetic medicine, insulin, and the overdose of insulin somehow gave him a shock that it seemed to make him better. You know, his mental problems seemed to become better. So from that experience, someone hypothecated that, well, if we give people an overdose of electricity, maybe that'll cure their mental illness also. From thinking like that, that's how this therapy came about. And I'm thinking of a fellow named Ron Murphy, who wrote a book about the area around there. And his grandfather was one of the people in charge there at Torrance. His parents worked there in the 1960s. And he remembered his mother talking about the place because she used to have to hold people down while they were being strapped down to undergo this electrotherapy. And whenever she would talk about it, she would cry because she remembered like the fear and the terror in these people's eyes and faces when they were getting strapped down to be, shocked. This is another building. This is the building of one of the supervisors out there. And also, they used to have classes out there for girls who were studying nursing, and they also wanted to be, made capable of dealing with people dealing with mental illness. Nurses, specializing in psychiatric nursing. A whole group of girls who were studying out there at Torrance. 1939, they were rebuilding the boiler house. The place itself had come up in the late teens, and then by around 1920, they were starting up. They were pretty well in business. And as time got on, we'll see a graph, and I'll show you how busy they became over time. This is the boiler house that they were building in 1939. What you can see is a railroad car here full of coal. This is the railroad track that used to go around there to keep the place going. At one time, there was a building project going on to make tunnels. The tunnels would connect the different buildings so people could go between the tunnels, to go between the buildings and not even have to go outside. Remember I told you we'd look at the patient distribution, population. You see from 1919 when it was starting up to 1920, you get to about 1960 and there were close to 3,000 people there. And when you have an institution that size that has that many people in, it really becomes impossible to deal with individuals, human individuals, right or correctly. And over the years, they did have the good sense to diminish the patient population until at the present time they have maybe around 300 people there, which means they can deal with people a lot better. They're not dealing with large numbers. This is the place, present time. We'll get a look at it. It's been greatly reduced, not greatly, but it has been very much reduced in size. They don't have nearly that many people to deal with. And the buildings are more humane. They're trying to give a picture of, something that cares for people, not just deals with large numbers. This is a pavilion where they would have picnics with the families of people that would be hospitalized there, and they could come out. And a greenhouse where people could work. This is a bit diminished version of the farming experience they hoped to have at the beginning. And a pool, which makes you feel better about the place because it's good that they have some, experience to go swimming, and, do exercise. This is an overall view of the place as it is now. Not as big as it was, as originally planned, but they're still there and doing things. The design caboose tells us that it's time to go. We've done enough. And we say so long now for Torrance, number 2.